Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for coming to join me. I am actually starting the live stream today just a little bit early. I am joined today because it's Wednesday. I know last week I joined on Thursday, and the goal today is to talk about the annual review process. And why am I talking about an annual review process? Well, first and foremost, as a person who was an academic, like many faculty, we had a required, fairly complicated system. And so for every year, for the 17 years I was in public higher education, I had to fill out an annual review form, mostly the first 9 years as a contract employee and a non tenure track faculty member. That evaluation was very important because it allowed me to then justify my, I forget what it was called, my petition to be rehired, or basically a request to be retained, something of that nature. And so initially it sounded like really intimidating, but truth be told, it wasn't really that intimidating because a lot of the things that I was teaching, nobody wanted to teach. And if anybody wanted to teach, they could have taught them. And I felt like it wasn't something that I really needed to dread. However, moving on to the tenure track, I felt like the annual review process as a faculty member took on a different, more unique type of significance in that there's this place in which you can't um, you can't like be honest about like the areas that are your growth and opportunity. Hey there, fly like me, Dr. Maya. Thank you for coming. So one of the things that I'll ask is if you would say hello in the chat, like Dr. Maya just did. I have a little poll that I want to start, and so hopefully, as people join in, they can share their responses. So, the reason why this topic is really important to me is, as I said, I never really felt good about doing an annual review process. I feel like even when I was in corporate America before I was an academic, the process of doing an annual review was a little bit less forced and a little bit more, in my opinion, fake and superficial. For the most part, your annual review was a summary of feedback that you'd already gotten, and it was a justification for a decision that had already been made to either promote you or give you a very high raise or a moderate raise. So, in where I worked in manufacturing, you were always going to get a raise that was going to be, to some extent, on the high side because we worked in a very competitive environment, the technology of which, if you didn't know what you were doing, you really weren't going to last long, and they didn't mind telling you to go somewhere. So you were going to be invited to leave. So I didn't really know of too many people when I was in corporate America who did annual reviews that weren't like pretty confident that they were going to be retained and they were going to get a good raise, but like how good the raise was. And so I felt like to some extent the system existed to justify who was getting what. And so I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense if you've only worked in higher education, which most of my audience is more education adjacent. So, so that's why I'm doing this talk, because I recognize, and I guess I knew this intellectually, but from an emotional standpoint, I've always known that the purpose of an annual review was to celebrate what you had accomplished, right? We are not perfect beings. We start out at the beginning of the year setting on some goals that we're going to work toward. And most people want to be recognized for what they're doing, and they want to be well compensated for what they're doing. Higher education is no different. There's usually not a financial benefit or a direct relationship to a financial benefit when it comes to an annual review. But so that is a little bit about the backstory of why I'm talking about this. I'm also talking about this because it's obvious that you are that it's December, right? And so we're all basically reflecting on what has transpired in the last academic year. It could be the fall semester. It could be the last calendar year. I seem to recall that most Januaries I was turning in some type of um, annual review or portfolio. Sometimes it was due in late November, sometimes early December, and the latest it would be due would be like January 15th. So for a lot of academic institutions, this is annual review season. And so, what I wanted to do was look at an opportunity to kind of talk about this and talk about ways to make it more rewarding, or at least to be more strategic and less intimidating. So, I have some notes. So, I actually have the notes on my iPad here that I want to make sure that I stick to my script. One of the first things I want to say is that not only is the annual review process important for your career, but it's also important for you personally. And there's some certain pre-work you want to do. So one is the mindset, is looking at this as something that we have to do as part of the mindset to be engaged with our goals. So it's an opportunity to look at your goals from 2024, and in those goals from 2024 to say, what did I think I want to accomplish this year, and how did I come to that list? Because life is lifing and things are going on, and so much has changed since you probably, and maybe like me, you made your goals for 2024 in December or late November. I often did that. I might refine them and not go public with them. So I see that Dr. Maya says that she looks forward to doing an annual review of her accomplishments, which is the way we're supposed to feel about it. So you have a very healthy concept and self-efficacy, Dr. Maya. I love that. And so putting ourselves in the framework that we're going to take the time to do it justice is important. Some people would say that you want to take a whole day to do it. I personally believe that for me, and I think it's important for you to know yourself well enough to know how well you're going to do it. I actually would start a month in advance of when I needed to do it. So say if my portfolio was due, say today, I would have started Thanksgiving weekend, and I would have started by going through the data that I needed to have access to. And I also find that I can get overwhelmed quickly looking at a lot of documents and paper. So I have a tendency to kind of set aside a day to look at different types of data. And so that's one of the ways that I would recommend getting started, is think about, can I dedicate an hour a day a couple of weeks in advance? So like maybe Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I would stay late at work and I would work on something for an hour or two. So you have to gather the relevant materials. So I am a person who puts everything in my calendar, and I have started doing that more so because I knew that the calendar was where I would start with my accomplishments. So the calendar doesn't actually list my accomplishments. The calendar lists where I'm supposed to be when, and deadlines. So for example, one of my goals every year, or at least the last couple of years, was to apply for grants and to be awarded grants, and then to hire people using those funds, and then to do reports on the data that we had collected with that grant. So any dates for a grant would be in my calendar of when it was due, when I turned it on, and even sometimes the blocks. I use block scheduling for when I'm working on a focus type assignment, like a special project. And then also in my calendar would be some key meetings or announcements, or a lot of grants where I worked. The types of grants that I was applying for required you to go to a conference and do a presentation. So those would also be in my calendar. So I would backwards date different things that were in my calendar, and then I would use that to make a list of what were some of the major projects. And sometimes, if you have a lot going on, there's always something that you forget. So I would still encourage you to consider the calendar as a valid place of data. The other thing is meeting notes. I personally didn't start using AI for meeting notes and didn't have a system for saving meeting notes. But what I would do sometimes, if it was a really strategic email where I'd had a really important conversation, I sometimes would email it to myself. So I might check my Gmail. I email it to my personal account from my university account. So sometimes that was another really good strategy for me, to be able to do a search in Gmail, because I don't know about you, but most people have like tens of thousands of emails. So I'm not a person who cleans out my email well. So even now I could Google in my email and find, anything that I had forwarded to myself from that account, and be able to look at the topics. And so now we get down to the nitty gritty. So you want to look month to month, working backwards from December to January. So I recommend doing it in reverse order so that the stuff that's fresh is more likely going to compound things that you worked on earlier in the year. But you should still go back and check month by month to see what were the things that you were working on, what were the things that you were accountable for. The other thing that I recommend, and I don't know if you all do something like this, there's different names for it, but I like to have sort of like you're the girl, you're the woman, or superwoman in the old days. Now superwoman is not considered a term of endearment because it suggests that we're overworking and doing things we shouldn't be doing. But I also would keep like thank you notes, mementos, awards. You get to a point in your career where maybe you've got so many certificates, you don't want to put them on a wall. You don't want to, they didn't give them to you in a frame, or you rotate things that go in the frames that are on your walls. But you have a file, which is sort of like all the good stuff, or even emails that you got that you want to share about results from people working with you. So you're going to assess your progress, asking some key questions. I think this is the real key. What did you really love about what you did this year? And Dr. Meyer, I'm going to ask you in the chat, what is the thing that you did in 2024 that you're the most proud of, if you don't mind? Tell me what were you most proud of that you accomplished in 2024? I'm going to sip some water. So one of the things that I am most proud of is that, so I think it's important to do an annual review, even if you're not working sort of a day job. I'm semi-retired and I'm a business owner and a YouTuber. And so as a result of that, I'm building my legacy and teaching in a different format than the way I did before. But that doesn't mean that I don't have goals for my channel, for my business, for my speaking engagements, for articles I want to write. And so my goals for 2025 will look different than they did a year ago, but I'm still going to do a year in review because I think it's important not to lose sight of the lessons that I gained. So Fly Like Me says, oh, I'm most proud of traveling to 5 countries. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, so that's a great example. So it had been a dream of mine to take a sabbatical when I retired, to travel to the UK, France, and Spain. And I was able to do that. And I would say that that is probably one of the highlights of 2024 for me. I think at the beginning of 2024, when I think about my career, there were things I was working on for my professional development, not professional development, but for my, I guess, outreach to the community, that were grant funded projects that I really wanted to wrap up and end well, and to put the university in sort of a good position so that after I left, they weren't sort of high and dry. And so when I think about my professional legacy and things that will move on, I talked some last week in the YouTube live stream about professional legacy or a career legacy. Those are the things that people say about you when you're gone. And depending on your age, that might not seem like something's important. But I think even though your professional legacy can shift over the decades, I think that when you start your career out with an idea, I want to make an impact in the Black community, I want to make an impact by publishing or being a well-known speaker. These are all things that are always going to make a difference in terms of how you spend your time when you're busy and doing those things that you're sort of told you're supposed to do. It's a good, to me, like yardstick of, is my legacy what I want, what I feel called to do and what I want to do, or is it what my employer needs me to do? It needs to be a little bit of that, because you may want to stay at your job and have a great reputation. So it says, I love the fact that we can take sabbaticals. What would you recommend that we do on our sabbatical to not feel unproductive? Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So for me, looking back, one of the things that I tried to do, first of all, I would say another one of my resources that I'm going to end up with is talking about getting in a network with the right people. And I know you and I are already like-minded on that subject, because you have invited me to be a part of a network that you're in. So I feel like for me, I was in a community Exodus Summit where there was a person, I believe it was Rashida, who recommended a colleague of hers that had written a book about sabbaticals, taking a career break. So I went through that book with a fine tooth. If you look at it, it looks like a book that I was something for grad school that I was going to be tested on. But that book was really helpful with me with brainstorming ideas, working on a budget, and coming up with goals for each leg of my sabbatical. And I'm actually still on sabbatical, but the first leg was traveling one direction of the world. The next leg of my sabbatical is traveling a different leg of the sabbatical. So if I look back at all of those plans I put in place, I actually went to more places than I had planned to go. So I think it's important to set goals. They might be geographic goals. They might be goals of books that you want to read. I did actually agree. I took books with me and said I wanted to read, and I read all. I did not finish the last book that I took with me. So I took 4 books with me for 4 months, and normally I can read 4 books, but for whatever reason, anyway, I was late getting started on one of them. So the last book that I was supposed to finish, I could have finished it, but didn't finish it. So I had a knowledge goal. I had a goal to expand my ability to speak Spanish. I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to really accomplish my goal of being able to be independent and communicate with the people I needed to communicate with, between private tutoring, lessons, Duolingo. I mean, I've spent almost 3 years now learning Spanish. And so that was another important goal for me. So productivity, I think when it comes to sabbatical in short, has to do with you being clear on what you want to get out of the sabbatical or the career break. And then still kind of like the process that I'm talking about. The year in review is, of the things that you wanted to get out of them, did you give it a good, I don't know, I want to say old college try. I know that's kind of a hokey expression, but yeah. So I was definitely not fluent. I did think actually that I could be fluent, and that when I was in Spanish, I would be able to communicate well. The reality was I was intimidated. It took me a couple of weeks to really even use the Spanish that I knew. And when people would speak to me in Spanish, I would understand it, but yet I would be intimidated and not respond. And when I was going conversations where they knew no English, I was able to hold my own. That doesn't mean I was fluent. It just means I was able to be independent enough to function as a resident of a small town where there were no English speaking people. One of the other things that I'm really proud of when I look back at my goals for 2024 is that I really was able to save a lot of money, not just by house sitting, but by staying with people that were Spanish speaking families in Airbnbs, and staying in communities that were off the beaten path, non-touristy destinations. And so that pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I didn't run scared or stay in the house and cry. I did think about it occasionally after a particularly, I don't know, complex conversation that didn't go well. There were a couple times I got lost and I was like, okay, I just want to stay in the house and hide my head. But anyway, so even that was like a huge growth experience for me. When I think about the me that never traveled anywhere by herself, or never traveled to non-touristy places, even when I would travel by myself, I was really proud of the fact that I really pushed myself to expand my comfort zones. And look, I survived. Here I am back in the US. So what did you love most about the work you did? And then what part of your work did you love the least? So I'm going to ask you also, Dr. Maya, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what was something in 2024 that you set out to do, if there was something, maybe you loved everything, that you're like, not so sure. If you want to share, if there's something shareable here, something that you loved the least, that you were not so happy about. And then just to kind of move on, the next questions, just for the sake of time, the next area is, what are you most grateful for in 2024 when it comes to your professional goals? And then what surprised you the most? So basically for me, I'm going to share that the thing that I honestly really love the least is that I tried to do too much. Many of you who may be in the Exodus Summit community know that both Stephanie, Perry, and Rashida have said, spend some time at the house. Don't be trying to go and do everything. And I do think that I thought I was following that advice, but having never been away from home more than a couple of weeks, it was really difficult for me to see until maybe a month into the sabbatical that there was no way I was going to be able to move at the pace I thought I was going to be able to move. And just one example of that is I scheduled a lot of house sits, and those house sits were back to back. Sometimes I gave myself 2 or 3 days off, but that wasn't near enough to accommodate the mental energy and the emotional energy of handling public transportation. And this was in the UK where I could speak the language. So that was one of the issues that I would say I liked the least. I tried to do too much. I took for granted that because it was an English speaking country that I wasn't going to be as tired and as stressed out as I was trying to navigate, neighborhoods and sightseeing. And then pet care is also obviously, it's work. It's not paid work, but it's still work. But in that, what I love the least is the thing I'm really grateful for is that I was able to, just like I would if I was teaching a course I didn't particularly want to teach or plan to teach, or it's not in my wheelhouse, but yet I have to teach it because of my service to the department, maybe my seniority. So you just suck it up and you do the best you can and you try to make sure that the students have a great experience. So I basically had to give myself sort of like a little pep talk and say, okay, we're here. We have to do this. It's not exactly what we planned, but we're going to work through it and we're going to push through it. We're going to get support. We're going to ask for help. And with that, I will say another thing that I'm really grateful for and that surprised me is that I was able to connect with other traveling sisters that were solo travelers in the Exodus Summit community and reach out to them and meet them for dinner or meet them for lunch or do a tour together, a walking tour. I did a couple walking tours together with one sister. Shout out to Leslie, wherever you are. And oh my God, that really nourished my soul. I mean, I just did not realize how much I just needed to see a like-minded person and have somebody. And it just in both of these cases, these were women who had been doing solo traveling for years, I think 5 to 7 years. And I'm at the beginning of my solo traveling journey, but we're also similar age cohorts as well. So there's the aging thing. So like you think, oh, I'm young enough to handle this and to do this, but yet your body is like, girl, what we did yesterday, we're doing nothing today. We're taking a rest day. And that can happen at any age. So another comment, congrats on pushing yourself to speak Spanish. I was not happy about my job market search. It took me 1 year to find a job with a PhD, and I was very disappointed by that. I wanted to work remotely. Yeah, definitely. I could see that being, and the funny thing is, I think, and I don't want to get off topic a little bit. I'm glad you shared that, but I think the whole remote work industry is really going through an evolution. Like a lot of people want to work remote. Like there's so many people that want to work remotely. And I would say that Libria Jones community about remote work, I have been in and out of her community. I actually arranged to teach 100% online my final year. I was living in Atlanta and still teaching for university in Illinois. I don't know that they knew that I was planning to retire at the time that I negotiated that, but it's water under the bridge now. But I was prepared to leave if I could not get that deal. And that was just, the way the chips were going to fall. But because of the competitiveness of the industry, I actually have 2 adult children, one of which works remotely. The other one wants to work remotely, but hasn't been so far hasn't found like the right fit. So I think that is something, but even in that, I think we should expect that there are going to be things that we want to do that are going to take longer, that are going to be harder. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't still shoot for like exactly what we want, like that ideal position, that ideal work schedule, that ideal strategy, so I would say I take it now. Maybe you found something, but it wasn't like exactly the type of schedule you wanted. That's what I'm reading between the lines here. So if you want, you could tell me offline, but if you want to clarify, you can. And then the other thing is identifying the prep work for your annual review is identify what are the growth areas and the challenges that you faced in 2024. So this might be something that surprised you and something that you pushed through and that you now are going to like look at strategies to handle differently. The next one, I'm just going to keep going, is to evaluate your job satisfaction and work-life balance. And so I'm going to kind of take those two together. And the reason why I think they're both important is because I think, as I said, even like in the job search or finding the type of job, one of the things that really was stressing me out this time last year was I had a grant that required me to do some things that I really struggled to find the right students to be able to take those positions for a variety of reasons I won't get in here. And what surprised me was that no, it felt like I was out there by myself and that the systems that exist to help me get that work done failed me. If I felt disappointed that the challenges that I faced trying to spend money that was given to me were as significant and as long-standing as they were. So if you're in an academic space or you're doing any type of project work where the success of the project is dependent on other people, you have to think about what happens if you can't get this done and like what is the worst case scenario. And at the end of the day, when you've done all you can do, you've done all you can do. And so I would say that was something that surprised me. That was something that disappointed me. It turns out that the solution was I ended up having to go back to the grant funder and asking for an extension, and then going back and asking them again for an extension, which they decided not to extend, but that we needed to return the money. And I think, I'm mature enough in my career to know that everything is a lesson, right? And I think it was the best thing that could have happened for them not to renew the timeline to complete the work a second time. So we hired somebody, we quit, we hired somebody, they didn't work out, and we couldn't hire anybody because it was like the wrong time of year. So as a result of that, the decision to have to turn back the money, I think, spoke volumes to the people who were not in a position to cooperate and support the vision of getting the work done. But the people who were in charge, or I guess you could call it the sponsored research department, they were not happy about the fact that we were going to have to return that money. And so ultimately, the system needs feedback on how the system is operating. And as a person who does career coaching and leadership coaching, I think that was a really powerful leadership lesson. Although technically I felt some kind of way about not being able to do all the parts of the project that I had envisioned, I met my goal of being able to achieve being awarded a certain number of grants, a certain monetary amount of grants, and being able to get done a significant amount of the project work that we were supposed to do with the grants. But not everything got done. And at the end of the day, it was a really powerful lesson about the constraints of leadership and how to ask certain questions before you take on certain responsibilities. So let's see, Dr. Maya says, yes, I work remotely for a nonprofit analyzing data, and I feel that I do not have good work-life balance. I transition into finding another position that would be a better fit. Yeah. And so sometimes our career journey is not, that way. I don't know. It's more, cyclical. I mean, I worked for the same institution for my entire 17 years, but I had something like 6 bosses and I changed colleges and departments. So because I was constantly searching for the opportunity to fulfill my own career goals for being on the tenure track and getting promoted, and for also being able to serve students in a way that I knew matched my strengths and talents. So evaluating your job satisfaction and life-work balance really gets us to where we want to go, because ultimately, I think one of the lessons that I had going through the annual review process of 2023 into 2024 was that I would no longer work at the level and intensity I had been working, and that at the age that I was, having put in the sacrifices that I had made for my department, that I was no longer willing to do that, and that it wasn't sustainable and it was impacting my physical health. And so I'm really happy that my decision to retire was successful, that my decision to go on sabbatical was also successful, and that I am now in the middle of the process, the sabbatical process. I also think in terms of my finances, I made a lot of decisions that were strategic and that were helpful and that allowed me to have work-life balance. Because here's another thing that I learned in preparing for the sabbatical. A lot of the stuff that we own and that we have and that we think we need, we actually don't need. And you can't take it with you. And even if you move, so I moved out of an apartment or out of a community that I've been in for almost 20 years. And a lot of that stuff, when I actually went through it, I've been carrying it from place to place and I didn't need it. So that was another part of work-life balance for me, is for me to see that what I actually wanted, I had. And it wasn't as much stuff as it was experiences. So I think my value system also began to change. So that is an important criteria as well. And so the next criteria is being able to look at our professional network and connections and say, do we have the right people in our corner? So when I looked at my career goals for what I wanted to do, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I was going to design online courses. I knew that I was going to go back to career coaching. I actually was a career coach many moons ago. And because I was on the tenure track and managing all these grants, I decided to put that aside for a while so that I could focus on finishing the grant project work in particular, and the teaching, passing the baton of managing the administrative part of the department. So as a result of that, I expanded my network nationally, internationally, interdisciplinary, outside of my profession. And I'll be very honest with you. I don't know if I had not have decided to make time to build those relationships, I would have been successful in doing everything I did. Even the women that I was able to connect with in the UK, that was, it was all God. I mean, I'm a woman of faith, and I really believe that because I put myself in a position to be humble and learn from people, even people half my age. I know there's some people at a certain age that are like, well, oh, such and such. I have a daughter that is 25 and a son that is 30. And one of my coaches or resources that I took advantage of, a course that they offered, is between my kids' age, and she's brilliant. And at the end of the day, as a person who wants to learn and grow and continue to excel in new areas, if I had had that attitude when I was trying to get one of the many degrees that I have, I would have never been successful. At the end of the day, you got to put yourself in a position to learn from the people that have the information. And so growing my network is another goal of mine as a person who is building an online community for faculty of color. I really think that looking at your network and saying, who's in my network? How do I expand my network? How do I make sure that I am giving more than I'm receiving, and being that person, that mentor who is willing to save people from the hurt, the disappointment, the stress that I went through as a younger professional. Those are the types of things, that I really want to be able to do. Okay, so I want to transition into some of the things to get ready for the meeting. So the next part of this is really to say, how do you use this information? So I've done this. I've gone through my year in review. I'm now aware that I have these 7 things that I've accomplished. 3 of them were, working across organizational boundaries, new skills I wanted to master that I successfully mastered. Maybe there's something that I worked on that I'm still working on that I want to wrap up. But there's some other things that you need to do in order to take this annual year in review and really use it to leverage your career goals for 2025. So one of them is you got to meet with somebody that has the power and influence to be able to help you get there. And so what does that look like? That looks like knowing what you want to ask. So when you have the meeting, and most people will give you a meeting, especially if it's your boss, and it may be that you need to meet with a mentor. Maybe it's not your direct, hire, or could be a college dean, could be a mentor, could be someone in student affairs or the non-academic side or the operational side of the business, but people who are in a position to give you the things that you want access to in order to make it to your next stop in your career. And so clarifying your professional goals based on your 2024 goals and what you accomplished is really key to being able to prepare for that meeting. So you went through your calendar, you went through your journal, you went through, I also take a lot of pictures at all kinds of stuff that I did on campus. So I'll go through my phone and look at pictures. I might put together a little portfolio. I also use LinkedIn strategically to tag people and ask people for recommendations. So I will go through that. And I also go through my bank statement to see what kind of things I paid for as well, or there's a particular credit card I use for travel that can help me identify. So I put that list together, I summarize it, and then I set up the meeting where I say, I want to go in and talk with you about some things that I've made progress on, some things that I'm not making progress on, some things that I need your support. And when I went in to meet with my dean, I'll be very honest with you, the meeting often went like, I know that you all think that I should be da 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 da. I know that you all would like it if I could participate in da 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 da. However, I'm working on A, B, and C, and I personally think that finishing A, B, and C at this time is going to be more important and more strategic, not just for me, but for the college. And then also being able to put those desires that you have, the things that you want to spend your time on, in a way that it makes that person, especially if it's like the dean of your college or your department chair, aware that it's what's in it for them in other ways. So I like to think about my professional legacy. I've always taught about civic engagement. I found grants that had to do with student voter education. And our college was one of the biggest colleges. I happened to be a program coordinator for one of the biggest programs. And I use whatever leverage you have to use those leverage and those strengths to kind of remind people sort of who you are, what you're working on it, and what's in it for them and how it helps them. So taking that list of accomplishments along with your career goals and aligning them to whatever your professional legacy is for the future determines what you're going to ask for. So you have to know what questions to ask. And this is why sometimes practicing this with a mentor can be really helpful. And you also have to think about, what is it that you need? Is it professional development? Is it funding? Long before I got external grants, I got internal grants. I had like the longest record of number of times that you could get an internal grant. It was like $500 to $1,000. But I got it like 4 or 5 years in a row because I felt like, there was always a small project I wanted to do with my students that would benefit me. And then the last thing, as far as getting ready for that meeting, is that you want to make sure that you're ready to engage in feedback. They may say things you don't want to hear. They may say something in a way that you don't want to hear it about things. For example, for me, I feel like one of the things I knew about myself and I knew that concerned my dean about me is that I was often focused on things that had to do with serving students. Now, you would think that's not a bad thing, but publishing, getting grants, and serving on academic committees is also important. So I did what I was supposed to do in the other lanes as far as meeting the minimum requirements. But I read a book somewhere along the way. If I can think of it, I'll do a video on it in the future that says, we don't have to do 100%. This work is not school. You don't have to get an A+ on everything you're asked to do. Sometimes a B- is called for. So I was very strategic in meeting with my mentor, actually 2 different types of mentors, and I'll talk about types of mentors in another video. But I think it's really strategic to think about, what are the things that you're going to do B- work on? Like, there's a to-do list and there's a not to-do list. It doesn't mean that you let the ball drop. It means that you either recruit somebody to do it, or you talk to somebody about why you're the wrong person to do it, and they get someone to do it. And so these are the ways that I think you have to be very strategic about how you move forward in 2025 and using your annual review process. So we talked about preparing to highlight your achievements, getting the data you need to shine in your annual review meeting. We talked about, there's actually lots more reflection questions to clarify goals and accomplishments. So by next week, I'll put a link to the rest of the questions, or to make them available to people who are watching this on the repost, who are watching this on the replay. And then I've talked about the power of meeting with whoever's in leadership who has the ability to give you the experiences that you need, or the mentoring that you need, or the opportunities that you need to align with your future career goals. So if you want to be tenured, you want to switch tracks, you want to just focus on, research writing and grants, whatever your strategy needs to be, you need people in place in your, what I call your social support team, to help you make those transitions. And so one proven strategy for growing your network, I'm a big believer in LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not ideal. It's not perfect, but I have been very successful at creating opportunities for myself and my students using LinkedIn. However, LinkedIn is a platform that does not belong to us. So one of the things that I did in 2024 that I want to invite people to do is to become a part of a private membership community, which I call Lead and Liberate, that I started a month ago. And right now we're offering a free 7-day trial up until December 31st. It's very affordable. It's designed for, what I would call underpaid faculty who are working at state universities to be able to participate and not feel stressed out by the financial burden. But being in a community that's a paid community allows you to get in community with like-minded people who want to support each other and want to make things happen in terms of collaboration for each other. So I invite you to take a close look at my community, Lead and Liberate. And if you are on the replay, I ask you to please make a comment, like, and share this video with someone who would benefit, who might be a little intimidated by the annual review process. I participated in the annual review process 16 times in my career. Not one single year did I miss. In the 17th year, I retired, and I decided I wasn't. I just literally was like, I'm not doing it. Somebody was like, oh, but you've done so much work this year. You should fill it out just so that you can be celebrated for what you accomplished. And I was like, you have lost your God, picking mine. Like, why would I sign up to do that? But anyway, I do feel like this is such an important topic for so many people, particularly women of color, Black women I know who have felt intimidated by the annual review process. And I also do individual coaching. So if you or someone is preparing for a meeting like this, and you feel like you have other questions about maybe how to ask certain things, how to find out certain things, and you need a partner to strategize with you, I also have some great benefits in terms of discounts for the end of the year for people who want to set up a relationship with an individual career coach for next quarter, first quarter 2025. And thank you so much, Dr. Maya, Fly By Me, PhD. Please stop by her channel. She also has an earned doctorate. So proud of her and so many other women who are not taking our expertise and handing it over to the academy, but are out here in these internet streets trying to make things happen, to make life better for people who need support and need information. And a lot of times we are privileged to be able to know how to get information, and create knowledge. That's what a PhD does. It allows you to become a producer of knowledge. That's what I often told dissertation students who are struggling with the dissertation, like, why am I doing this? Thank you so much. So that's it for me today. And I will see you. So next Wednesday is actually Christmas. So I am going to be preparing a recorded video that will be posted on Christmas Day at some point, because I'm really committed to sticking with my Wednesday commitment for you all. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.